Since taking over the reins as the Toronto Raptors general manager in 2013, Masai Ujiri has made countless bold moves that have seen the Raptors improve, whether it be trading Rudy Gay during his first season in exchange for a host of role players, whether it was drafting Pascal Siakam late in the first round out of New Mexico State, hoping that his motor, his work ethic, and his talent would turn him into something greater than what a lot of people projected him to be, and well, inevitably that happened. Or as recently as just 2 years ago, in which Ujiri traded away franchise cornerstone DeMar DeRozan for Kawhi Leonard, which again obviously turned out to be pretty successful, it's fair to say. And these are just a few of the moves that Ujiri has made that have taken this Raptors team from a struggling team under the management of Brian Colangelo to one of the NBA's best franchises. I know this isn't probably the best time to say that given their slow start to the season, but we can all agree over the last half a decade, they've been one of the best teams and one of the most consistent teams in the NBA. That's undisputable, actually, if you just look at the win tallies. They've been fantastic. But apart from the trades he's made, something that's really impressed me, not just about Ujiri, but the Toronto Raptors in general, is their drafting ability and their ability to develop players through the draft. Something that stands out above any other team in the NBA when I look at a team over the last several years. Now, before I go any further, if you could drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel, I make content like this every single day, and doing so really helps out a lot. Just dropping a like, it would be much appreciated. Subscribe if you want, that'd be cool as well. As a new host of players declare for the NBA draft each year, numerous players are certain of a future which will entail NBA basketball. You've got your generational prospects, your Zion Williamsons, your Luka Doncic's, your Ja Morants. These guys aren't just secured of a top 3 pick, but they're also secured that they're going to come in the NBA, they're going to make a lot of money, and they're going to make an impact from the get-go. And we've seen that recently over the last few years. Jason Tatum, the list goes on. A lot of these top draft picks have come in and been incredibly good from the start, which results in shoe deals, Instagram followers, money, just everything, and sees them become the star of the franchise within the space of a year, maybe even less sometimes. That's how good the recent prospects have been. But amongst these guys that are secured of money and fame and all of these things that you get when you're a top draft pick, there are these players that aren't drafted and aren't secured anything in the NBA. Maybe they go back to college, some of them finish a degree, just give up on basketball. I mean, one of the NBA's best shooters, Duncan Robinson, was planning on doing that exact thing until he eventually made it to the NBA. That is the fine margins we're working with when talking about undrafted prospects. But over recent years, there's been a bit more of a push towards undrafted prospects, and they're making a real name for themselves, a lot of these players, because they're showing that if you go overseas for a year, if you spend a couple of years in the G League, an extra year in college, you can still make just as much of an impact as someone who comes out of college 19 years old with all the potential in the world, because once you get to the NBA level, it's a level playing field, and a lot of these guys are showing that they've got just as much talent and ability as some of these guys picked a lot higher in the draft. But it hasn't always been the case that this has happened. Let's take it back to the year 2000, the turn of the century. In 2000, we saw 17 undrafted players play in 70% or more of their team's games throughout the course of the season. Over the course of the next 13 years, only twice did we see more than 20 undrafted players have significant roles in teams throughout the course of the season, with the average being around the high teens over this period of time. And if we were to look back at the number of undrafted players in the NBA having an impact on NBA teams just 9 years ago, we would see that it was at an all-time low for the 2000s, with only 10 undrafted players making an impact on their respective NBA teams. Now, 10 years later, as recently as last year, we had 40 undrafted NBA players playing a significant role in the NBA. There's been players come and go, but in general, there's been a major push for players that weren't drafted and have made a huge impact playing significant game time on their teams. And a person and a team that's been front of this evolution in the NBA drafting process is Masai Ujiri and the Toronto Raptors. Now, everyone saw the impact that undrafted guard out of Wichita State, Fred VanVleet, had during the playoffs just 2 years ago, and then as recently as last year having a fantastic season, which earns him obviously a big payday. They've seen how good he can be at the NBA level, emerging as one of the better two-way guards in the NBA, but I want to take it back just before he made it to the NBA, because he spent 3 years playing at a productive level for Wichita State, being a catalyst for a few upsets along the way. However, despite his impactful play over an extended period of time, he would not be selected in the draft, or at least selected with the intentions of being an NBA level player. He received a few offers, it's said to believe late in the second round, that were interested in him having to play for the respective teams in the development league, but Van Vliet opted to bet on himself, which I'm sure is a slogan that many of you guys are now familiar with because he's made that a part of his brand, and he signed with the Raptors in 2016 with a guarantee of just playing 3 summer league games. But as a result of impressing the coaching staff and members in the organization, he went from 3 guaranteed summer league games to a guaranteed 2-year deal, and well, I mean, the rest is kind of history. That's a corny way to put it, but since then, he's turned out to be pretty good, an NBA champion, a near all-star player, $20 million a year. The Raptors and Fred VanVleet are both pretty happy with that decision to take a chance on the undrafted, undersized guard out of Wichita State. But VanVleet's just the standout for a number of Raptors' recent undrafted players that have turned out to have success at the NBA level, and one of those big success stories is emerging right in front of our eyes, and that's Chris Boucher, who's having an incredibly productive season. I thought, and many others thought, that in the absence of Gasol and Ibaka, he would step up. He's done more than any of us could have predicted because he's been fantastic in the last half a dozen games. He's been on fire, he's knocking down 3 balls, he's blocking shots, and ultimately, he looks like he might have star potential. Maybe he won't reach that star potential, he is 28 after all, but then again, it is also pretty much his second season in the NBA, so there's still a lot of room for upside, but at the very least, an undrafted player out of Canada has turned out to be a very, very good role player and a soon-to-be a very consistent starter for the Raptors. But outside of 2 players that are turning out to be just about stars for this team, starting-level players, and better than just starting-level players, they've had a couple of other success stories. Matt Thomas and Terrence Davis aren't getting the minutes this year, but you've seen enough to suggest those guys are NBA caliber rotation players. Terrence Davis, a good backup point guard. Matt Thomas, one of the best shooters in the league already, shooting 53% from 3 this year and shot like 46% last year. They're not in Nick Nurse's rotation. He's very strict defensively and just very strict as a coach. Maybe some would call it stubborn. I mean, he's had his winning ways, so you can't really argue with it, but those guys have fallen out of the rotation, but I don't think that suggests they're not good enough to be NBA players. I think we've seen plenty to suggest those guys are rotation pieces on most NBA teams. At the moment, they just can't crack the Raptors' rotation. But that's 4 players in just the space of a few years, 2 of which have turned out to be starting level quality players and have got 2 big paydays, and 2 other guys that I think are pretty much rotation caliber players at a number of NBA teams for quite a few years to come as well. That just shows the amount of talent you can get looking outside of the draft and the amount of talent the Toronto Raptors have been able to capitalize on going outside of the conventional ways of getting that said talent. But the reason I didn't just want to heap all the praise on Masai is because not only is there a lot more people that go into scouting and selecting players in the draft apart from just the general manager, but also you need to look at the development of this team because it's not just about who they draft. It's not that one team can be so consistently good at finding diamonds in the rough. No, a lot of this has to come with their ability to develop players and do so through their G League affiliate, the Raptors 905. I mean, this is evident with them having made the G League finals in 2 consecutive seasons and winning the title in 2017. Having a strong G League affiliate, in my opinion, is probably one of the most underrated aspects of an NBA franchise. You've got your teams that will bring in lottery guys who you expect to contribute straight away, but for teams like the Raptors, who are obviously always pretty much up the top of the table, apart from this video, as I said, not the best timing in this front, but they're often at the top of the table and only get late first round picks, late second round picks, and undrafted players. Often these guys come in maybe not ready to play at the NBA level and have to develop through the G League system, and that's where the Raptors have done a terrific job at turning these players from project players to players that can make an impact at the NBA level. I mean, only a couple of years ago, Chris Boucher was the MVP of the G League. That shows that there can be a transition made. Christian Wood was dominating in the G League. Now he's one of the best young bigs in the league. You can make that transition, and the Raptors have shown you can make that transition through the Raptors 905 probably better than from any other team in the league. I've always found it interesting how teams have been so interested in 18-year-old guys who can jump 50 inches but only averaged 1.3 points in college, as opposed to guys that spent multiple years in college performing at a very high level and showing that they're ready to make an impact on a team. There's been a lot of teams make those decisions to go for the highly athletic potential guys as opposed to the productive guys. And it turns out the Raptors' approach to going for more productive, mature-aged guys, which you can look at. You can look at Pascal Siakam, who is a late first-round pick, a mature-aged guy. Fred VanVleet, Chris Boucher, Matt Thomas, Terrence Davis, all of these guys were selected into their 20s. Malachi Flynn now looks like a steal, in my opinion. I think once he gets into the rotation, he's going to be fantastic. All of these guys, they were drafted later in the draft because of their age, mainly. And all of these guys so far have turned out to be worth more than what they were selected at. Malachi Flynn is yet to prove that, but I just imagine he will. I can pretty much guarantee he's going to be a solid rotation player like so many of these Raptors players turn out to be. But it's not just Toronto. There's a number of teams around the league. I look at Houston, who have made a name for themselves now of getting these undrafted players as well. You look at the team that they have currently, Daniel House, Jayshawn Tate, and even Mason Jones now. These guys have all cracked into the rotation, have come from overseas, have come from the G League, have been mature age players out of college. All of these guys I mentioned for the Rockets didn't make it at their first attempt of asking at the NBA level, but they persisted and they continued to show that they're worthy of a role, and all of a sudden they've proven that they can make an impact immediately. I could look through a number of other players, a number of other teams. Lou Dort on the OKC Thunder. These guys, mature age guys coming out of college, coming out of the G League, overseas, that wouldn't have been given a chance maybe as recently as 10 years ago, are now being given more of a chance, and I think a lot of it has to do with the movement the Raptors have made with Fred VanVleet, Chris Boucher, Terrence Davis, Matt Thomas, even the likes of Pascal Siakam, who wasn't undrafted. He was later, he was an older player. These guys that they see, that they pick up later in the draft that have turned out to be so good, I think teams are taking note. And if teams aren't taking note and they continue to just gamble on these players that are 1 in a million chances of turning out to be stars, where you've got these productive role players just sitting there waiting to be picked up, I mean, that's their loss. But a team that's really not losing out on anything in the NBA draft or outside of the NBA draft is the Toronto Raptors. And that's why I wanted to make a video on this, because I think they've done a fantastic job at developing and finding gems. I don't want to put it down to drafting or developing. I think it's 50-50 split. People often forget one or the other. I think they both play a big part, and that's why the Toronto Raptors have been so successful, because they've got the best of both worlds. One of the best GMs, the best GM in the league, and probably the best developmental team in the league as well, which leads to a team that obviously gets the best out of their prospects, unlike any other team in the league. That's pretty much all I've got to say. I did ramble a bit towards the end of the video. I went off script, but if you did enjoy the video, if you made it to the end of the video, you may as well subscribe and like the video, because if you could put up with me talking for 15 minutes, then you could probably do it another time, so that'd be cool. Other than that, I'll catch you next time. Have a good one. Bye.